You know, the media absolutely loves smearing Jordan Peterson because he's influential, I guess. He's got a ton of followers. He says some things that make sense to a lot of people. He encourages young men, and because of that, he must be a bad person. Now, I think Jordan Peterson said some pretty silly things in the past, mostly on his views on religion and stuff like that. He doesn't have a degree in history. He's a psychologist. So when he talks about things related to psychology and to an extent biology and sciences, I'm willing to listen. When he talks about the philosophical, he's definitely had some gaffes in the past. But that doesn't mean I seek to misrepresent him. It doesn't mean I think that he is the arbiter of truth. I just think he's an interesting guy with interesting opinions, and he makes some good points in terms of encouraging people. And it's interesting to see this from a clinical psychologist. I think there's a lot of people who follow him for his political beliefs. I think there's a lot of people who weigh his opinions very heavily. I am not one of those people. I am not going to malign Peterson because I don't have Jordan Peterson derangement syndrome. He's just a guy. He is a religious fella who's got some beliefs, and he's like many others I'm willing to listen to. But here, we have a story that is somehow equating Charlottesville with Jordan Peterson and healthy masculinity. This is from Salon, and it reads, "After Charlottesville, solving the problem of angry men. What does healthy masculinity look like?" Salon talks to sociologist Michael Kimmel about radicalized men, extremism, white supremacy, and Jordan Peterson. What? Why is Jordan Peterson in this article? Jordan Peterson has denounced the alt-right frequently. And he's actually talked about how he tries to pull people away from this kind of identitarianism. I don't think the far left realizes what identitarianism is, and it's almost like when, somebody wrote this great Facebook post a while ago, and they said the reason why the left argues definitions so much is because they really try to make sure that their beliefs sound different from the alt-right. There's a reason why the regressive left and the alt-right are frequently talked about in similar avenues, and it's because I think they're kind of the same thing. They're identitarians, just in different directions. You've got white identitarians, that's what we refer to as the alt-right. And then you've got left identitarians, and we refer to them as social justice warriors. Identitarians are people who just uphold their identity above all others, which to me is ridiculous, especially when we're supposed to be creating a community with people who look different, who believe different things. We can't homogenize. It's insane for both. I think one of the arguments from both sides, mostly the right, I think it's only been a couple people, has been segregation. But there have been a lot of people on the left who have insinuated or actually moved for segregation. Like during Ferguson, there were rooms set up at activist meetings for colored only. And I genuinely thought it was like a prank or something. I was confused by it because that's segregation from the 50s, but no. So, Sargon of Akkad made the joke that they should work together. They believe, the Black Lives Matter wants to create safe spaces for them. They want to have black-only events. And the alt-right wants to have their ethno-state. There you go. There you go. Segregate yourselves. So let's look at one of the most insane things they've said about Jordan Peterson. And then I want to talk about, I've got some other links pulled up about free speech and what's going on. Unite the Right too is happening. And let me just say before I read into this, anybody who's going to that is clearly out of their goddamn mind. Seriously. For the most part, anybody who went to the first one, I think was, I don't want to be too mean to the dopes who showed up not realizing what they were getting themselves into. But let me say this. Gavin McInnes, the guy who founded the Proud Boys, he disavowed Unite the Right before it happened, saying we don't want to be associated with these people, okay? If Gavin McInnes knows that Unite the Right is like white pride, white nationalism, and neo-Nazis, then you don't have an excuse for being there. There were a lot of people who claimed, they just didn't know. And it's like, yeah, well, there you go. You walked into that one. That's what you get. And now they're doing another one. You've got to be absolutely out of your gourd to go to that. Because even if you believe some of this stuff, even if you are a white supremacist, a white nationalist, or a racist, and you go to this, you're not going to accomplish anything. You're nuts. I think this event is going to be a bunch of far lefties holding a rally, holding hands, because no one's really going to show up. But we'll see what happens. Let's, for now, look at what they said about Mr. Peterson. So they talk about how they did this interview, and where did they first bring up? Okay, so, well, actually, let's start at the beginning, because they said, this weekend marks the one-year anniversary of the white supremacist riot in Charlottesville, Virginia, during which anti-racism and human rights activist Heather Heyer was murdered. Dozens of other people who stood up against white supremacists and others operating under the banner of the alt-right were injured. The white angry men who marched through Charlottesville chanted hateful slogans. Lots of hateful slogans about the Jews, chanting things are like, yeah, I don't like reading these things because people take them out of context. These right-wing brigands displayed their fealty to Donald Trump with great enthusiasm by chanting the slogan, Make America Great Again, and wearing his de facto uniform of tan khaki pants and red MAGA hats. In total, the Charlottesville white supremacist riot was the explosive result of aggrieved white masculinity and racism. Okay, they're calling it a white supremacist riot. I don't know what I would call it. I understand why they're calling it that. It's obviously biased, but it was a riot. There were white supremacists there, but there was also a lot of, SJWs. Like, Unite the Right was kind of the social justice wars and the alt-right coming to a head. And there's a reason why I wasn't there. I don't go to these fringy events. I don't go to alt-right events. I don't go to Antifa events. I don't go to SJW events. I don't do it. I go to, like, normal discourse events where, the stuff you see on TV, like, you'll notice that I use, like, CNN a lot as my sources. Yeah, I just talk about what most people typically talk about. And I don't go to these weird fringy things. But call it what you will. We got to talk about, they get into Jordan Peterson. And, so suffice it to say, I think the bulk of this video is going to be more about the insanity. But we need to, so here's the start where they say, when you read work by Jordan Peterson or Ross Douthat, I don't know what that is, which tries to analyze the crisis in masculinity and in the process seems to enable some of the worst aspects of men's behavior, how do you make sense of it all? Why is their work so popular and apparently respected as being serious and worthy of debate? Because it is rigorous? And he goes, to start, I would not lump Jordan Peterson and Ross Douthat together. They are not in the same terms of the origins of their claims. The broader lesson here is that every 20 years or so, some male guru comes along and he says to men, your lives are empty, they're meaningless, you're not going anywhere. Now you have Jordan Peterson saying, your life is shallow, stand up straight, dig in, do something hard, do something meaningful with your life, will you? Just get off your ass. Oh, by the way, it's not your fault that you're sitting there watching the world go by, it's women's fault. This is an argument that people have always been making. In this logic, he says that if women would just put out a little more, then men wouldn't have to, don't even want to say it. If women, assault them, to say the least. If women would just put out a little more, he says that it would end prostitution. It takes the types of malaise that Peterson observes among men and tries to offer solutions. I agree that young men are looking for meaning in their lives. They will find it, but not in these places that Jordan Peterson thinks. He basically says that you men are lacking meaning and resilience, but it's not your fault. He says it's women's fault. Or he's saying that Jordan Peterson is saying this, to say the least. And what is this system that these right-wing men's rights types and others are suggesting, but basically a kind of state-run brothel? What? He says we're talking about The Handmaid's Tale here. In many respects, Jordan Peterson is a philosophical clown, an intellectual court jester. He likes being provocative, but he's not conscienceless. Peterson is a serious guy who has serious ideas about male malaise, but his diagnosis of it is so mistaken that he can't possibly offer a solution to it. What? Telling men to be responsible and to respect women is a far cry from what this man is describing. Look, admittedly, I don't watch Jordan Peterson lectures. I've seen some of his speeches. I've listened to the debates. I'm pretty sure he's not blaming women because he's very individualist and anti-identitarian. It would be strange to see Jordan Peterson make that argument when he advocates for the individual against the collective, okay? And noting that feminists have men and women among their ranks, and social justice warriors are of all different backgrounds, as are the right. What? This is look, I don't understand why people can't just be honest. I think it's because people really are evil. To me, evil is the belief that you have a right to take from others without their consent, to manipulate, to steal. There's a lot of ways that can happen. You can trick them into giving up their goods. I think that's wrong. I got into an argument with some Republicans, and I said coercion and manipulation are wrong. And they said, whoa, wait a minute. If someone agrees to give you their money, what's wrong with that? And I said, if the media simply convinces you that everyone in this room is a Nazi, what's wrong with that? And they got offended, say, oh, that's wrong. And I'm like, yeah, lying to people to push your agenda to empower yourself is wrong. And that means if you're selling snake oil and lying to people to convince them your snake oil is going to cure them, to me, is the moral equivalent of pointing at someone and saying Jordan Peterson thinks women are trash. but he doesn't. That's absolutely not true. Pretty sure Jordan Peterson's married with kids, and he respects his. I'm pretty sure he's got a daughter. You know, it's insane. The ideas that people will push for their agendas. I got a couple things I want to add before I wrap up on this video. We've got this story. Airbnb warns that it may expel Unite the Right rally participants on Charlottesville anniversary. I don't need to go through the story. I just want to point out, yes, if you are actually planning on attending that rally, you are a lunatic. I'm sorry. Like, that's the most offensive I've probably ever been in directly calling someone a name. But first of all, many of the people who showed up in the first place, the first one, were overt racists, white nationalists, and not very fine people. I'll admit, there are some people who are Trump supporters who didn't know what they were getting into. But then, I'm gonna have to say it, you really gotta do your homework before walking into a rally with a bunch of people like that, okay? And I don't know if you get to be called a very fine person if you're going to ignorantly walk into a crowd of people chanting things about the Jews and chanting things about blood and soil. Sorry, not good enough. But, so suffice it to say, you know my opinion on the matter. But I saw this is really interesting. Erica Sakin on Twitter said, up this morning and aghast to hear NPR giving white supremacist Jason Kessler a platform to spew hate and BS, and even worse, to hear him presented as both sides against the Black Lives Matter movement. How dare they? She says, you do not invite someone on the radio to let them respond to the leader of a hate group. To the leader of a hate group who just on air called them biologically inferior. You don't air that shit in the first place. I think it's important we know what these people believe. It's scary to me that this woman thinks she already knows what Kessler believes. No, you know what Kessler believes because you heard him say it. She heard him say he thinks people are biologically inferior. Imagine a world where everyone just says we're not going to let someone speak because we know what they think, and you don't. Then when someone claims that Jordan Peterson thinks women are inferior or some other nonsense, they're going to believe it. It's a damn good thing Jordan Peterson's allowed to speak up and be on a platform to counter that lie, okay? It's also important for people who don't know who Kessler is to hear just how bad, just how wrong he is in terms of his arguments. He can believe what he wants. I'm going to stay the hell away from him, and I'm not going to go to an event he's putting on. That works for me. And some people accurately point out, it's called the media. You share your opinions, even if you don't agree with them. It happens because this is still a free society. And then we see, someone says, but they present it as two sides of an argument, which is not what it is. Erica says, yes, thank you. If one person's argument is that black people are inferior, that is hate speech. It isn't something that even deserves to be treated as a valid argument to be responded to. Yes. Someone put this. There's this comment that's gone around, and you've got the KKK and Black Lives Matter on one side saying they want to kill, the other side, one saying want civil rights, and there's a person in the middle offering compromise. And everyone's like laughing, like, ugh. But this is a straw man. The argument is not this. You have people demanding ethno-nationalistic controls and more rights based on race and more control based on race, but not murder. There are a few people on both sides who want murder. There are black identity extremists who have murdered several people, many, many people. There was the guy in Texas. There was the guy in front of my apartment in New York City who executed a Latino and Asian cop. He was a black identity extremist, okay? He didn't kill white people. And then you had the guy who went and shot up a church in retaliation for the Dylan Roof shooting. Extremists can exist no matter which side of the identitarian spectrum you're on. The argument isn't between one side wanting to kill the other and the other side wanting civil rights. The argument is between the restriction of rights versus the granting of rights. That's a better argument, okay? Now, I don't know if Jason Kessler is saying he wants to kill people. If that's the case, then yeah, that's wrong. And that's not free speech if he comes out and says that he actively intends to commit a crime. He can say that he doesn't like people and how he feels about them, but there is a fine line between that and saying things that are, you enticing or inciting people to violence. Anyway, suffice it to say, the culture war sucks, man. We need freedom of speech. How are you supposed to know what people think? And then when Salon smears people, you're just going to follow suit. And that's part of the problem. It's reciprocal effect. People who read Salon and far left sites hear lies, think they know what's being said, and then say, you know what? I don't need to hear anymore. And then how do you cure yourself of the misinformation if you won't listen to the interview in the first place? All we learned from the Jason Kessler interview is that he has terrible opinions and is not a good person, so don't go to his rally, or now you know why you should protest him. What you're saying is that other people shouldn't have a chance to learn for themselves, and they should just listen to you, and that's wrong. Democracy, the distribution of power, decentralization, giving everyone equal opportunity. the opportunity to learn, to understand, to have their voice heard. But it seems like too many people are more authoritarian than that. Anyway, I'm out. I'll see you all tomorrow.